We are on chapter 14 today, which is about physical perfection. But we're going to start on subchapter Only Our Concepts Limit Us on page 197. And so without further ado, Miss Tracy.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I am so happy to be talking about and talking with you about this physical perfection chapter because this week I have had a little bit of a challenge with my physical perfection, and I have had to remember what it is that we teach. If you are with us for the first or second time on Sunday morning, we use this time to dive a little bit deeper into what Ernest Holmes wrote in the book, The Science of Mind, a faith, a philosophy, and a way of life. And we've had so many of you join us who may not be familiar. So I just want to invite you to, if you don't already have the textbook, that it is an opportunity every Sunday morning for us to dive a little bit deeper and take it section by section, almost paragraph by paragraph. And as Ryan announced, we are beginning today on page 197 in the section titled Only Our Own Concepts Limit Us. Please join me in a centering thought and prayer. I simply take this breath, knowing and affirming that now is the perfect time to not only recognize the perfection of spirit, but to recognize it is the perfection of spirit that is operating within each and every one of us, each and every person. In fact, each and every creation, in order to reflect, in order to tap into the physical expression that is also perfect. And so diving in and knowing and calling this time good and very good, I simply claim it as so. And please join me in affirming that by saying, and so it is. So what does Ernest Holmes have to say about this? Realizing that conscious thought operates through a power which is infinite, we see there can be no limit to the power to heal other than the limit of our ability to conceive that power as healing. First sentence, repeating. Realizing that conscious thought operates through a power which is infinite, we see there can be no limit to the power to heal other than the limit of our own ability to conceive that power as healing. We are limited not by principle, but by our own inability to see perfection. Our thought can bring out a condition as perfect as we can conceive. Therefore, the man or the person whose thought is the most God-like, that is, the truest, the highest, the most noble, the most complete, the most peaceful, will be the best healer. Thought reflects a greater perfection. That is why we cannot divorce true mental healing from true spiritual work. When thought reaches a higher degree of perfection, as the race consciousness unfolds and evolves, it will bring out a still greater development of life than we know now. Now, that's the whole section on only our own concepts limit us. And as you heard, or maybe you're reading along, the idea that principle has no limit, spirit has no limit. And spirit is always responding to our thoughts, our demands, our expectations, and our beliefs. So, right? If I say I want my shoulder to operate at full capacity, but I don't really believe that's possible, then it can't happen because I am putting limits. Or if I say, my shoulder is hurting so much, and you know how it is. You know, I had that rotator cuff injury, and yeah, it flared up again in January, and I've been really careful, but the last couple of months I haven't. So, you know, it's gonna take probably about 2 months before it feels better. The universe simply says yes. The universe says yes. And so it maybe could heal or be better in less than 2 months, but I'm the one who's put the timeline on it. And so obviously some of you who know me know I actually did have a recurrence of a rotator cuff injury and a pinched nerve in my shoulder this week. And I admit the first 12 hours, I was in so much pain. All I was doing was the human dance, right? Oh my God, this hurts so much. Oh, what's happening? You know, is it this? Is it that? Oh, you know, everywhere you could possibly go, right? Including, I don't have a fever, but you know, yesterday I was aching all over. And now this really hurts. Do I have COVID-19? I mean, my brain went everywhere it could go until I did some spiritual work. And then I remembered I have choice. This does not have to continue. You know, I have options. I can go have a doctor do an x-ray. I can go look at it. I can go figure out from a human perspective what's happening. But what was most important was me getting spiritually grounded and returning in my mind to my shoulder was not hurting 3 days ago. The physical perfection of my shoulder is not only possible, but I should expect it. And then all of a sudden, I remembered things like, this happened last January, what worked? Like what physical resources do I have? You know, acupuncture really works. It's an option. So my prayer work, I asked a practitioner to also be in prayer, and I went to the acupuncturist, and I began doing an affirmation of my shoulder works perfectly without pain. My shoulder works perfectly without pain. My shoulder works perfectly. I am flexible and whole. My shoulder, I am able to lift my arm straight up without pain. I just started affirming what I wanted to see that would reflect physical perfection. And yes, I'm much better now. much, much, much better now. So this idea, first sentence, only our concepts limit us. Realizing that conscious thought operates through a power which is infinite, we see there can be no limit to the power to heal other than the limit of our ability to conceive that power as healing. Now, because we're talking about physical perfection, please remember, and if you've been with us the last couple of weeks, then you understand that the mental healing does not necessarily mean the physical happens just like this, but we have to choose and then support the body in catching up to what we have claimed to be the spiritual truth. Now, in a couple of minutes, I'm going to ask Ryan if anyone has any questions, and he'll walk you through that process. But I just want to lay this foundation before we do that, because I do want you to share your examples and of when you allowed your own concept, your own limitations to slow down your physical healing, or when you were able to make this shift. But I want to make sure that we all get this, that we're the ones who choose, which was a couple of weeks ago, back a couple of sections, but we have to choose it for the universe to be able to support it and move us toward that. Once I chose, like not idly, but I got really clear. Wait a minute. My shoulder was working just fine 3 days ago. 3 days from now, my shoulder's going to be working fine. All right, 24 hours from now, my shoulder is going to be better because that's the demonstration that my body is catching up to my mental clarity. Does that make sense to you? When we talk about physical perfection, we know that things happen on the physical level with our bodies, but that does not limit us to stay there. And so this whole chapter is about how do we use mental thought, how do we use science of mind, how do we use law and spiritual principle and spiritual practice in order to close the gap and get in alignment our physical, emotional, mental, and physical experience, and make sure they are in alignment with the spiritual truth. So Ryan, why don't you give people instructions on how they can share, comment, or ask a question?
Thank you, Tracy. And I always love talking about the manifestation topics. So if you're over here with us on the Zoom room, there is a button located down at the bottom. It's the raise your hand icon. You can hit that, raise your hand, and share your questions or comments. There's also a Q&A button down there. If you'd like to leave some comments or questions, please feel free to do that inside of the comments or questions or the Q&A button as well too. And if you're on Facebook Live, you can always join us in the Zoom room by going to the link in the description that I posted above. And if you have questions or comments, feel free to hit them in the comments section on Facebook Live, and I'll bring them here into the room. I do want to mention that all the chat I keep confidential, so feel free to ask questions and know that you're in a safe container for doing that. Right now, I'm not seeing any hands up. I can do the long, awkward pause if you'd like.
No, you don't have to do that because this is so rich. I'm happy to hear from people, and I can keep right on going. So,
one that came through the Q&A that's really just agreeing with what you're talking about, Tracy. But I know what it really boils down to. It basically says, so true, you don't get what you say, you get what you believe.
Yes.
And I understand that our beliefs actually create our environment. Is that true?
That is true, that our beliefs influence or become the primary influence in our environment, in what we experience. It's not the only thing, because we have our own individual consciousness and we are operating within the cultural consciousness, or the consciousness of the collective, which Ernest Holmes talks about as race consciousness, the consciousness of the human race, not racial ethnic identity group. And so the consciousness of our human race has a major effect on our environment, right? When we have smog, or when we have discrimination, or when we have the fires, when we have things, when we have 1 out of 4 women are going to be diagnosed with cancer. That's a collective consciousness, and it does influence our environment. But we have major influence in our individual experience. I think I like to say that more, because no matter what condition occurs, we get to drive how we respond to it or how we navigate through it. So we don't have as tight a control on the environment as we like to think we have, When I decide I want to move the furniture around in my house, or I want to go buy a new dining room table, right? I'm controlling my home environment. And I have a lot of control or influence there. But as soon as I walk out of my house, I don't control the environment of my neighborhood because all my neighbors are contributing to that. And think about that with the workplace or the CSLDallas community or the nation or the world. So when Ernest Holmes reminds us that only our concepts limit us, he's reminding us that we do have sovereignty over our individual actions and reactions or responses. And in this case, as we're looking at physical perfection, it is up to us individually to determine how we navigate our return to wholeness. I hope that makes sense. Like, physical things happen to our bodies, right? Our bodies are physical, and so they respond to the environment, they respond to what we choose to eat, they respond to too much Zumba and injuring the shoulder, right? Your body is responding. So we can change the inputs when we want to get a different response. We can change how we navigate through the pain or the discomfort or the disability that occurs because there is something happening in our physical body. But we are moving ourselves back into alignment with the physical perfection that is the foundation of our experience. And that's what this entire chapter is about. If you weren't with us 4 or 5 weeks ago, before that we looked at the mental and spiritual process, and then we looked at what causes misalignment, and then now we are looking at understanding healing and how it works.
So Tracy, I want to just pause you right there because I have a couple hands up.
Great.
And I really love what you're saying, but I wanted to read this chat that came through, and then we'll go ahead and get the folks who have their hands raised.
Perfect.
So this came through. It says, my mother-in-law was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer a few days ago. After speaking with her, she was so positive that I noticed I was very optimistic about the treatment. The following day, I did research and I was immediately devastated. I mean, how many people can relate to that, right? Should I refrain from researching in those types of cases? If you want to answer that, and then we can get to the rest of the folks.
So that's such a perfect observation and question. So what we teach in Science of Mind is that we don't do a spiritual bypass. So we don't just teach think positive and everything will work out. So every one of us has to determine how much of the world can we take in. We recommend that people research what they need to research from sources that they need to research from in order to know what their options are on the physical plane, and at the same time to be strongly grounded and to constantly reinforce the spiritual truth. And so yes, in that research, maybe I only talk to doctors versus I spend 10 hours on the internet reading everything that I might possibly read from all kinds of people who I don't know where they got the information. Or that research, maybe I only look at these 3 sites that I have been referred to by other people who have healed from cancer. Or right, so you might want to put some criteria around what you research or how much time you research. But I wouldn't say don't research at all, because you have to know, or in this case, your mother-in-law has to know what options to choose between that support the alignment with healing. And absolutely, knowing physical perfection and knowing spiritual healing techniques and processes, it's not a miracle. It's aligning ourselves with how the law works, how spiritual law works. And that's different than just being optimistic or thinking. It's like, I'm not optimistic, I'm sure. I am sure because I know how God works. I know how spirit operates. And that's what I'm lining up with. To other people, that may look like I'm optimistic. But if it's spiritual bypass, that, everything always works out. Don't tell me anything, then we wouldn't support that. That's such a great question. Thank you for asking it. Back to you, Ryan.
Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Marianne. Do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, Marianne, and ask your question or comment?
Hi, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Good morning, Marianne.
Good morning. It's great to be here. It's wonderful to see your smiling face. Thank you for being here also. I wanted to share an experience that I had about a month ago. I did a session with the practitioners that occurs after the service on Sundays. Mm-hmm. And that was actually my first time to do that. And the experience that I had was, it was very quick, and the practitioner just really cut to the chase and declared that I am the inexhaustible expression of the fullness of life. And that just struck me deeply. And it did so because I had an experience also physically of chronic fatigue for 25 years. I could very often just barely get through the day, and there were so many things that I couldn't or didn't do because of energy limitations. And being an inexhaustible expression of life, I took that on. And so every time, I never realized how many times I said, oh, if I do this, I'm too tired to do this, or this is exhausting, or all of the things that I tell myself many, many times a day, every day, and done that for years. And so when I catch myself, I would say, no, inexhaustible. I am inexhaustible. There is no end to the energy, the vitality, the wholeness that I am. And I want you to know that fatigue is not an issue for me. I can't say that I am like running around like I was 15, but wow, there's so much that I'm able to do and contribute, and I am loving life because, wow, I'm the inexhaustible expression of the fullness of life. Who wouldn't love that?
Yes. Marianne, the inexhaustible expression of the fullness of life. And you just demonstrated or shared how it demonstrates, how what we say begins to demonstrate in our lives. So thank you for making that connection and noticing how often your own words were actually, if you think of your words as a constant prayer, if I'm constantly saying, oh no, I'm anticipating, that's going to be too exhausting, or I can't do this, or if I do this, here's the negative outcome. The universe only says yes. It only has one word in its vocabulary. And so the more we program our brain to notice what we are saying, and then to shift it to what we actually know is the truth with a capital T, Yes, you start experiencing the inexhaustible energy of spirit, of the divine that is already planted within you, that you have access to, that you can tap into, that every one of us has access to, and we notice our experience begins to shift in order to align with that. And that is exactly what is happening. And over the process of our own bodies, the physical getting back in alignment with the truth of us, then we begin to experience that more and more consistently. Thank you. That's such a great example.
Yes, I thought so as well, too. I'm going to ask Anita. Anita, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, ask your question or comment?
Hey, good morning, Tracy. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning.
So, talking about this thing of physical perfection, and for 40 years, I had a knee that did not allow me to do all the things I wanted to do. Until the universe decided to get my attention and have it kind of blow up on me last October, so that I couldn't actually even get around without having to use a cane. So I'm really grateful for the infinite wisdom of the universe that created, through medical technology, joint replacements.
Yes.
Right? And so now today, where before I couldn't even fully extend my leg, I was limited in the flexion of it. I had a full knee replacement done last December because this was, what I needed to do, but it was what I was guided to do as well. And today I have full extension of that leg. I have more flexion in it, that they term it as highly successful replacement, because the flexion exceeds what their expected ranges are. And yes. the thing that about this whole thing, that I went into it with fear, because when I had surgery 40 years ago, I developed a blood clot in the knee. And it's through my faith and my request of the practitioners at CSLDallas to support me in prayer through that I had absolutely no complications with this surgery whatsoever. And that's really where the perfection of the universe has truly displayed in that whole process. So thanks for the opportunity to share.
What a beautiful example in so many ways. So one of the things I love about what you shared, Anita, is the reminder that we are in a physical body. And so when you share that, over several decades, this was a challenge, a physical challenge, and at a certain point, it became really clear that you needed to use different resources to resolve this challenge. And then being both guided, I think it's a good example of looking at doing the research, right, about what's possible, and also moving through the fear in order to be able to see that this, and believe that this actually can work out. This actually can work out well. And third, getting the support that is required, because even when we know about physical perfection and we know about spiritual truth, sometimes we can't hold it all ourselves. And so, both you and the previous commenter referred to using practitioners. So we can be our own practitioner, and we are. Anyone who practices science of mind is a practitioner of science of mind, and we can also surround ourselves with licensed practitioners and ministers who are trained to hold the truth for others and to guide and to teach and to support. And so I love every bit of that example, every bit of it. Ryan, do we have someone else before I keep moving or no?
No, I think we're pretty much settled on that. So if you want to dive a little deeper, I'm sure everybody can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Well, I really do want to dive a little bit deeper because the very next section is about spiritual mind healing. And the examples, all three of the comments, all three of them open the door to what Ernest Holmes has to say about spiritual mind healing, beginning in the middle of page 198, if you're following along in the Science of Mind book. He says, never forget that conscious mind is the only capital A actor in the universe and in humanity. That the unconscious or subjective mind is compelled by reason of nature to accept. Okay, what does that mean? It means that the conscious mind, what I consciously choose, is the driver. And the unconscious or subjective mind, right, we call it subjective because it is subject to what we claim or demand of it. It must respond to that, right? So if I'm saying I'm exhausted, I'm not well, this isn't going to work out, the subjective mind or the unconscious mind has to deliver on what I'm saying. So the sentence again, never forget that conscious mind is the only actor in the universe and in humanity. That the unconscious or subjective mind is compelled by reason of its nature to accept. It can never reject. The body is an effect with an E. The body is an effect with no intelligence of its own. We can now see that a mental treatment is a real, tangible, specific operation working in perfect accord with known law. When a practitioner treats anyone, she does not just hope that her patient will get well. He does not ask that the patient may be healed. They do not simply desire that the patient or the client may be healed. She convinces her own mind that the patient is perfect, a definite piece of mental work, bringing out in her own consciousness, in self-contemplative conscious mind, an understanding that the patient is healed and is perfect. Now that's a lot of words. And if you've read enough Ernest Holmes, you know that's not unusual. It's a lot of words that simply mean this. When I, as a practitioner of science of mind, am doing a spiritual mind treatment, I am not begging, I am not beseeching, I am not hoping that maybe kind of Spirit's hearing and will do something. And I am not seeing you as sick and broken down and hopeless. I know, I believe that, as Ernest Holmes says at the end, that you are healed and you are already perfect. That what you are experiencing is temporary. I don't deny it. It's happening to you. You're telling me about it. But it is not the truth of you. And at your core, you are perfect. And whatever the gap is between your core perfection and the experience you're having right now, my spiritual mind treatment, your spiritual mind treatment, is simply about closing that gap, returning you This was what you were experiencing, returning you to the core truth of spiritual perfection, having been made in the likeness and image of the Creator, right? So this is critical, because if we can't get the mental truth and believe it, then we are basically saying, well, okay, Tracy's shoulder is injured. Well, you know, it's always going to hurt. It's never going to be perfect again. If I buy into that the universe says yes, my unconscious or subjective mind takes that in as that's the order I'm placing, right? You go to a restaurant, you place an order. What I believe and what I say is like placing an order. So the next paragraph I want to read, and then I'd be delighted to answer any questions you have about this. Treatment, spiritual mind treatment, spiritual mind healing. That's what we're talking about. Treatment is the act, the art, and the science of inducing thought within the mentality of the one treating, which thought shall perceive that the body of a patient is divine, spiritual, and perfect idea. Treatment does not necessarily treat every organ of the body specifically, but it does declare the body to be harmonious and that every specific idea in it is harmonious. It then pays special attention to what appears as the physical disorder. As a result of this treatment, subjective mind, the unconscious, which is universal and omnipresent, accepts the images of the practitioner's thinking and reflects them in the direction that is specified to the patient. There's one mind, a universal subjective mind. When I plant my treatment into the universal mind about John Smith, then universal mind directs that energy, that belief, and that claim to the experience of John Smith. Okay, I can keep going, but I'm going to stop there. If you have a question, a comment, your own example, do we have anything, Ryan?
Yeah, well, there was a couple of things that came in through the chat. And so I just want to read one of these really fast, and it's short and sweet. So what you're basically talking about is I have to develop a sense of conviction. Is this also the same as faith?
Ooh, I love that comment and question. So our conviction is our belief. And in the context of Ernest Holmes defining faith as a mental attitude, then there's some overlap. But what Ernest Holmes also talks about is faith is a mental attitude that is embodied with such belief. This is not a quote, this is a paraphrase, that the mental attitude is embodied in such a way, right, that it changes our actions. So conviction is belief and passion about that belief, and faith is then taking that belief and truly representing that belief in what we do and say. Does that make sense? Now, for some people, they might say conviction, that's what conviction is. Some people, they might say, well, my faith is what I believe and my conviction is how I demonstrate that belief. So in that sense, they are very close, and you can almost use them as synonyms. And you could definitely say they are both representations of what you truly believe, not just what you say you believe.
That's great. That's a great explanation for it. So one of the comments, as far as an example, they were talking about basically prior they had cancer, and the doctor gave them a grave diagnosis. And through the use of spiritual mind treatment, they were able to, on one level, feel the presence of healing. And through the Western tradition of medicine, they were able to get the right supplements to induce that healing. So their question is, this mind-body connection, how do we now move that strength and that power into the other areas of our lives? And they're giving an example of manifesting a relationship. So can you speak a little bit more to how this applies to all areas of our life?
Yes, I can. Because this is the way it works. Period. This is the way it works. Back in the Introduction to the Science of Mind textbook, right, there are 4 introductory chapters. One of them is, what is it? What is God? What is spirit? And how does it work, right? And how can I use it, right? And so that's the way it works. And what's so beautiful with this particular example is having experienced it in what for most people is the most challenging aspect when we're talking about our physical bodies and health. If I can experience it and use it, experience the power, use the power, focus the power, experience the demonstration with my physical body, it is no different, whether it's relationships or career, whether it's finances, whether it's education, it doesn't matter. It works the same. It works the exact same way. So in a physical healing process, I love the wording of I could feel the power, and I also combined that with, on the physical plane, supplements and being directed to those, or chemotherapy or radiation or whatever modalities I am choosing because they are resonating with what I know to be my physical perfection, the potentiality of physical perfection. I do the exact same thing. So if it's about relationships, I do the same kind of visualization that I did when I visualized myself as healed from cancer. I do the same kind of process that I know now works for me, whether it is working with a practitioner or writing 10 affirmations and repeating them every day. Whatever spiritual practice helped me to feel that power operating in, as, and through me, then I simply transfer that to this other channel of my life, and it will work. So the reason we're talking about health is simply because in chapter 14, Ernest Holmes focuses on physical perfection. But let me also add this. Physical perfection is not limited to illness versus health. So physical perfection can also be thought of in terms of the physical experience I have, right? The physical experience I have while I'm in this body. So my relationships, my creative expression, those are all physical experiences that I have. And so, again, you don't even have to go outside of this chapter to make the application, but it is the exact same process. Spiritual principle, faith, spiritual practice, conviction, consistency, and all of that is built on a foundation of belief. What do I truly believe is possible? What do I truly believe is the truth of me and the truth of life? Those beliefs that are the foundation have to be there. And then I start applying spiritual law and spiritual principle. I'm going to stop there.
And thank you for stopping there, because I have kind of a cool question to ask you. So this one, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. Basically, what the person is saying is, if they have an ailment, let's say your shoulder, we'll take that as an example, and it feels like maybe the treatment that they're doing, as they're going through the process of treating for the ailment, they suddenly realize that it's a deep-seated belief that they have, let's say about their own mortality, right? That's a lot deeper. So their question is, do I treat for the ailment, or do I treat for the deep-seated belief, or do I treat for the acceptance of the belief and just for overall peace? Which one do you do?
Or none of the above?
Or none of the above, and treat for ice cream and cake.
Or all of the above? So here's the deal. Be really clear. When we are talking about doing a treatment, we are not treating for what's wrong. We're not treating to fix what's wrong. We are treating for wholeness. We are treating for the expression of the perfection. Now, in order for that perfection to express itself, that means that whatever is quote unquote wrong is going to go away. But my treatment is not focused on the shoulder. My treatment is focused on, of course, my arm is flexible. I can raise my arm without pain. I am treating for what I want the outcome to be. So that's first and foremost, that we have to remember. We're not treating the cancer. We're treating for wholeness and the perfect health of this person to express. We are focusing on our mind on what we want, because as I just read a little while ago, the subjective mind is going to deliver on that. So when I do realize, because we do spiritual work and we do spiritual coaching and we do spiritual reflection, if I am noticing, oh, this is just a demonstration or a reflection of some deeper or deep-seated false belief, then my question to myself is, what is the truth? And I start treating for what the truth is. I don't have to keep digging up the old belief or the false belief. I don't have to go, now I can go to traditional psychotherapy, and from a psychological perspective, if I want to dig into that and work through that, I can. And there's nothing wrong with that if I feel that's what I need to do. But from a spiritual perspective, I'm not digging into that. I want to notice it enough to say, oh, that's not the truth. This is the truth. And then my affirmations and my treatments are focused on delivering the truth into my experience. So the only other thing I'll say, and then our time is going to be up, so I'm glad this one is how we will end. The only other thing I want to add about that is sometimes when we are not believing the truth, we can't believe into the truth. And we say, well, yeah, I know that's the truth, but, right? But this has been happening since I was 10 years old. But my parents always said, but, you know, I never meet anybody who would be in I could be in a great relationship with. Then we do treatment to eliminate the but, right? So, oh, but I've dealt with this for the last 60 years. It started when I was a child. Okay, what is that? What do you want instead? right? If you didn't have that belief, what would you have? And then that's what I do the treatment for. And when I begin to believe that, then I can go back to what the original treatment was for. So if the immediate issue is something that is immediate and I want to have something different, I'm treating for that. If I recognize there's something from way back in my past and it has a different desired outcome, then I may treat for that. But either way, I'm not doing treatment for the pain, whether it's long-term, short-term, for the dysfunction, whether it's long-term or short-term. I'm doing treatment to establish the physical perfection or the perfection expressing in my life. And we're going to stop right there. And we're into spiritual mind healing that starts on page 198. So you might want to read into that. It goes over to page 200. And next week, Dr. Petra will probably start in with spiritual mind healing, repeat those first couple of paragraphs, and then go a little bit deeper. I hope this week you go a little bit deeper, that you go a little bit deeper into your own physical perfection, that you define that you believe in it, and I simply invite you to join me in knowing the physical perfection of life itself is seeking to express in everything it creates, and each one present is no exception. I claim it, I know it, I affirm it, and I accept it. Yes, this is the truth, and so it is. Have a great week.